Hello, and this is the Progressive Cynic. In this video, I will be discussing a very specific form of revisionist history that the modern American right uses. Now, the modern American right claims many very, very popular and influential Americans as their intellectual forebears. You often hear the names Ronald Reagan, Ayn Rand, Martin Luther King, Jesus, and Lincoln thrown around, and no one thinks anything of it. Now, unfortunately, there's one very real problem with this. Jesus, Martin Luther King, and Lincoln were not actually conservatives. They were progressives, and the right wing has basically adopted them because they want to be associated with people who actually did great things. I'll concede that Ayn Rand and Ronald Reagan were extremely conservative. I mean, Ronald Reagan ran up the debt, he massively increased the income inequality in America, he implemented an extremely regressive tax code, and he committed treason when he collaborated with Ayatollah Khomeini in order to sabotage Carter's presidential election campaign. Now, Ayn Rand is also conservative. She was a psychopath who supported the idea that everyone should be out for themselves. She idolized a serial killer who killed kids. And she was also a massive hypocrite who took Social Security despite her entire philosophy being that anyone who takes Social Security is basically a worthless moocher. Now, the conservatives can have these two, but they can't have the other three. Now, let's do this in reverse chronological order, starting with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was a progressive. He believed in equality for all people and for the elimination of the conservative religious and racial biases of the time. He wanted to make a world where everyone has access to a certain level of respect and is treated equally under the law. This is an incredibly progressive outlook, and it actually fits very well with his much lesser-known economic ideals. Martin Luther King actually supported unions, and he supported a strong social safety net. He believed that people should be taken care of, even if they're unable to pay their way in society. And he was very active in supporting the common worker. Now, none of these ideals at all fit with the modern right wing. They're the ones who destroyed the Voting Rights Act. They're the ones who decided it would be a really good idea to start re-disenfranchising people based on, economic factors now. They're the ones who also decided it would be a brilliant idea to try to crush unions in every way possible. Now, if you look at the modern American conservative movement, it would be diametrically opposed to Martin Luther King if Martin Luther King and the conservative movement existed in the same time period. In fact, I have no doubt that Martin Luther King would be labeled a race hustler, a rabble-rouser, and worse, particularly by the Republican news outlet Fox News. They would treat him much as they have other civil rights leaders, say Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton. And there's no reason to believe that they would treat him any differently. The fact that he is dead and idolized, rightly I might add, by a vast majority of the population insulates him from being attacked, but it also causes these people to try to absorb him into their ranks. A bit farther back, we have Lincoln. Now, if there's one person who believed in small government, states' rights, and the ability of states to make their own laws, it was certainly Lincoln. I mean, it's not as though he fought a war to prevent some states from doing some really immoral things. Now, there's no way you can say that Lincoln was a conservative. He may have had some right-leaning views, But the vast core of what he did while president was to help preserve the Union when a bunch of rogue states decided to try to peel off and become a Confederate States of America. In fact, a real small government conservative named John Wilkes Booth shot him. In fact, he even used some of the language which is common in the militia right nowadays. Sig semper tyrannis. Death to all tyrants. I don't think anyone can deny that that sounds exactly like what one of the modern right-wing militia movement or other right-wing extremists would say. Now, a bit farther back, we have Jesus. Now you may think, oh, this guy was incredibly Christian. I mean, it's in the name. And he must have been very conservative, much like the modern American right-wing Christian movement. No, in fact, Jesus was not conservative. This is the man who decided it would be a good idea to throw the money changers out of the temple. In case you don't know who money changers are, they're bankers, and they're also commodity brokers. This is the equivalent to like a Middle Eastern guy with long hair and probably sandals walking into, say, Bear Stearns and just wrecking the place. Who thinks that the conservatives would support Jesus' attacking of these poor bankers and job creators? And you get to his social message. He believed in inclusion, tolerance, and the person who is without sin throwing the first stone. Now, I don't know if anyone else has followed politics nowadays in like the past few years, but the right wing has thrown quite a few stones, particularly in cases where there's massive hypocrisy, say sex scandals, where you have right-wingers saying, oh my God, look at these Democrats doing these horrible things in their bedrooms. And then you find out, oh man, they're doing something unpleasant in a Washington bathroom, or with underage congressional page, or hiking the Appalachian Trail, which is a euphemism for sleeping with your mistress in another country on the American people's dime. And finally, you get to taxation. I have a quote from Jesus. Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. This is a literal quote that says, yeah, pay your taxes. And look, there's no reason to go specifically into the text of the Bible. The meaning of Jesus' words is very, very clear throughout everything he said. Support the poor, treat everyone well, and don't idolize wealth. That is not the modern Republican ideology. They idolize wealth. They think all the poor are moochers. They think that if you can't pay your way, you really shouldn't be allowed to mooch off of the people who are actually making all the wealth. I mean, how do you think that would jive with Jesus' quote? But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. Really? He sounds like a right-winger? Or at least a modern right-winger? No one can say that with a straight face. I mean, if Jesus were alive today, he would be seen as the most incredible liberal. I mean, he would be seen as beyond left-wing. And, I mean, come on, the turn the other cheek stuff, yeah, that's strong on defense, like the good conservatives are. What I'm getting at throughout these three examples is an overarching theme where the right wing does not have heroes that it can actually say, oh, they were ours. They have a string of disasters and failed campaigns at instituting bigotry. As such, they have to borrow very popular progressives. Now, this is ultimately a matter of historical revisionism, but it is also a matter of modern-day politics. The right wing is not on the right side of history on any of these issues. They don't have any popular ideas, and in most cases, their ideas are incredibly anti-populist. They cannot find something which the American people will support, thus they have to steal progressives in order to make themselves appear more palatable. They're not more palatable. When they use these names, they're just using the names. They aren't actually going into the policies. They're in fact doing the exact opposite of what these incredibly popular historical figures have proposed. The American people need to learn this and need to stop taking these people seriously. Whenever you hear someone say that, say, Jesus, Martin Luther King, or Lincoln was a conservative or would have been in massive support of the American right wing, they are lying or stupid. Same is true with many other names, like, say, Adam Smith. But I'm just not going to get into that. This is merely looking at this pattern. Now, there's very little that we can do once this infiltrates the culture. People get something in their head, and you can't shake them from it. It becomes common knowledge. We must prevent that from happening, because if an entire generation grows up thinking, oh yeah, look at that, Martin Luther King was a Republican, and he supported the right wing, they must be the better party on this. It just ends badly, because it leads people to make mistaken assumptions as to the current stances of the conservatives and the progressives. Look back in history and try to find a conservative hero. It's not easy. Then try to do the same thing with a progressive. Just try it out for a few minutes and actually look at what these people have done, not at what the right wing is talking about them. Thank you. This has been the Progressive Cynic.